was never meant to play. Stop chasing the high. Reclaim your throne. You weren't born to audition. You were born to rule, not loudly, but unshakably. Not to perform for love, but to embody it. Part 3, she wanted to feel you, not fix you. She didn't leave because you were broken. She left because she felt you trying to make her the cure. What you called vulnerability felt as weight. What you thought was intimacy, she experienced as obligation. You were confessing, unraveling, bleeding in her hands, hoping your openness would bind her to you. But she didn't want a patient. She wanted a partner. You mistook self-disclosure for connection. But connection isn't built on exposure, it's built on embodiment. On owning your shadows without needing her to hold them. You believed if you showed her everything, your pain, your fears, your unhealed wounds, she'd see the real you and stay. But she didn't want to be your therapist. She wanted to trust your leadership. She needed to feel your strength despite the storm, not drown in it with you. Because here's what no one tells you. Emotional expression without emotional control isn't intimacy, it's dumping. It doesn't deepen the bond. It drains it. It's not that she wanted you cold or closed. She just needed to know you had yourself, that your emotions were navigated, not outsourced. That you didn't require her to stabilize your chaos in order to stay centered. A man who shares from solid ground invites closeness. A man who shares from collapse creates pressure. And pressure kills desire. Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to suppress your emotions. He'd tell you to command them. Because in matters of power, the uncontrolled become the controlled. And in love, the emotionally dependent become emotionally dismissed, not because they're unlovable, but because they make love feel unsafe. The masculine isn't emotionless, it's the container for emotion. It's not about hiding. It's about holding. You wanted her to see your wounds and stay. But she wanted to feel your depth without falling into it. And when she realized you were handing her your wholeness, asking her to complete what you hadn't claimed yourself, her instinct whispered. This isn't mine to carry. Women don't fear emotion. They fear instability. They fear the man who can cry, but can't stop. Who can feel, but can't lead. Who opens up, but never rebuilds. You thought transparency was strength. But transparency without sovereignty is just glass, easily shattered. She didn't need you to be perfect. She needed you to be anchored. To prove that when your world shook, she wouldn't have to hold you up. Because a man who carries his own weight makes space for her to soften. But a man who collapses into her softness forces her to harden. You wondered why she grew colder. Sharper. More distant. It wasn't her nature. It was your surrender. Not to her, but to your own unmet wounds. Part 4, lead with energy, not explanation. You thought leadership meant words, promises, plans, reassurances. But she didn't listen to what you said. She listened to what you radiated. Masculine leadership isn't verbal. It's vibrational. It's not about telling her you're solid. It's about being solid, so consistently that she feels it before you speak. You explained too much. You chased her confusion with logic. You tried to fix her doubts with debate. But desire doesn't live in reason, it lives in energy. In tension. In the unspoken space between certainty and mystery. And here's the truth, the more you explain, the more you expose your fear. Not of her, but of losing her. She didn't need paragraphs. She needed presence. She didn't want your arguments. She wanted your aura. Because who needs to explain his worth has already doubted it. Real power doesn't announce itself, it arrives. It doesn't plead, it chooses. It doesn't chase agreement, it embodies it. She tests you not out of cruelty, but because she's seeking something deeper than words, resonance. She wants to know. Can I relax into his presence? Can I trust his calm isn't an act? Can I surrender Because if you crumble every time the room grows cold, she won't feel held, she'll feel alone. Machiavelli understood what most men never do. Power doesn't respond to noise. It responds to posture. You tried to win her with transparency. But transparency without sovereignty is just neediness in disguise. She wants to see your soul, but through the lens of your own mastery. Because she'll never feel safe with a man who needs her for balance. She craves your vulnerability. But only after she's felt your spine. Can you show her your pain after you've processed it? Can you speak your truth without needing her reaction? Can you be open, but still in command? That's true leadership. You don't lead her by managing her emotions. You lead her by mastering your own. She isn't watching your mouth. She's watching your nervous system. How steady your breath is. How still your hands remain when her words sting. How rooted you stand when every instinct screams to react. Because that is where she decides. Can I trust this man when life gets heavy? And if the answer is no, she'll pull away, not because you're not kind, not good, not honest, but because you haven't yet become unshakable. Machiavelli would say, a man who cannot lead himself will always be led by those who can. And in love, leadership isn't a title, it's an energy. A frequency. A quiet certainty that says, I don't need your approval to stay whole. I don't need your validation to remain rooted. I don't need your response to hold my ground. That's not detachment. That's grounded masculinity. That's the man who doesn't fold when the feminine storms, but stands, unwavering, and invites her home. Because a woman doesn't want to feel your need. She wants to feel your center. Passion, reclaiming your core. You thought closeness meant devotion. You believed staying near, always checking in, always being available would make her feel secure. But what it really signaled was, my center moves with you. And no woman can trust a man whose roots follow her footsteps, because what she says she wants and what she tests for are not the same. She might say she craves consistency. But if your consistency comes from need, not choice, she'll feel it. She'll sense. Your calm is conditional. Your stability depends on her. Your love is more hunger than truth. And need doesn't feel like love to her. It feels like weight. Like pressure. Like emotional gravity with no direction. Because attachment says, I need you to be okay so I can be okay. Attraction says, I am okay. And you're invited into that space. That difference changes everything. She isn't drawn to the man who clings. She's drawn to the man who chooses, who could walk, but stays. Who could crumble, but stands. Who doesn't order her, but shares a world with her, without losing his own. You believe that giving more would earn more. That if you were more open, more available, more there, she'd feel more secure. But instead, you gave her a man who didn't know how to leave, so his return meant nothing. Because return distance, it's about depth. When you handed her your whole heart too soon, without boundaries, without rhythm, without self-possession. You didn't inspire devotion. You dissolved tension. You collapsed the very mystery that makes a woman lean in. And once mystery fades, so does desire. Not because she's cruel. Not because she's shallow. But because something primal asks. Is this man rooted in himself, or in me? Because the man who orbits her cannot protect her. The man who chases her energy cannot anchor her. So if you feel her pulling away, growing quiet, turning distant, don't push closer. Return to your edge. To the man who doesn't react, but remembers. Who doesn't beg for closeness, but radiates a preside whether she can meet it. Machiavelli would call this strategic withdrawal, not as manipulation, but as maintenance of command. Because when a king gives too much too fast, his people don't feel loyalty, they feel entitlement. Likewise, when you give yourself too freely, too completely, without discernment. You're not being loving. You're being lost. So reclaim your space. Not in anger, but in alignment. Not with silence as punishment, but with stillness as proof. I belong to myself first. You are welcome, but never worshipped. This is what she needs, even if she'd never say it. Not a man who attaches from fear, but a man who attracts from wholeness. Part 6, Masculine Energy in a Modern World, the Art of Contained Fire. The world tried to tame your flame. They told you to get in touch with your feelings, but never taught you how to hold them. They praised sensitivity, but not strength. They called vulnerability power, but forgot to teach boundaries. So men cracked open, spilled out, and called it courage. But what they revealed wasn't depth, it was leakage. And women felt it. Not as connection, but as chaos. Because your emotions aren't meant to spill. They're meant to inform your leadership. Modern masculinity isn't about being emotionless, it's about being directed. Not about dominance, but angst. Not about shutting down, but knowing when to open and when to contain. Because here's the unspoken truth. A man who bleeds on contact might earn sympathy, but never trust. A man who can't regulate himself can't protect anyone else. And a man who wears his heart on his sleeve too soon becomes easy to predict, and easier to walk away from. Not because emotion is weak, but because undisciplined emotion is. She wants to feel you. Not the overwhelm. Not the over-explaining. Not the apologies for simply being a man with weight. She wants to feel the edge. The containment. The quiet power of a man who's walked through fire, and learned to warm without burning. She wants access to your soul, but through a gate, not a flood. Because it's not your vulnerability that repels her. It's the lack of control in how you offer it. Real man doesn't hide. But it also doesn't perform. It stands. Grounded in purpose. Measured in speech. Open, but not owned by the moment. And this is the paradox. The more emotionally in command you are, the safer she feels to open. Because your containment creates space for her expansion. You don't need to posture. You don't need to pretend. You simply need to lead, with calm, not chaos. Machiavelli said, "It is better to act from necessity than choice." And in the modern world, the necessity is self-command. Because if your emotions lead you, you'll always be chasing approval, attention, affection. But if you lead your emotions, you become the man no woman forgets. Not because you overwhelmed her, but because you stood firm when others broke. Part 7, The Power of Mystery. Louder. In your hunger to be understood, you said too much. You overshared, over-explained, overexposed. Thinking transparency would build trust. But here's the truth. Mystery isn't deception. It's direction. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about holding yourself in a way that's her lean in to discover you. Because not everything felt needs to be said. Not every thought deserves a voice. And not every truth requires translation. Real presence isn't loud. It's not constant reassurance or poetic speeches. It's the pause before you speak. It's the silence between her question and your answer. It's what she senses but can't define, the magnetic pull between curiosity and certainty. You thought sharing more would make her stay. But in reality, you left no room for her to wonder. And what a woman can predict, she can no longer pursue. Because mystery activates instinct. It's the uncharted terrain she longs to explore. And when that terrain is too familiar, too mapped, too exposed, there's nothing left to journey toward. You became the map, not the mountain. And no one climbs what they've already seen from every angle. A woman doesn't fall for a man she fully understands. Cheaply, yet still wants to know more about. That's the difference. Not withholding to manipulate, but protecting your inner world with intention. The modern man has confused transparency with truth. He's forgotten his power. Because a man who gives everything away too soon isn't generous, he's unguarded. And a man with no boundaries around his soul may attract attention, but never lasting respect. Machiavelli knew this well. He wrote not for lovers, but for leaders. And his lesson was simple. Power isn't about what you reveal. It's about what you reserve. Your attention. Let it be earned. Your story. Let it unfold slowly. Your heart. Let it open only to those who've proven they can hold it. Because every piece of yourself you offer should be sacred. And if you give it away too easily, too soon, she won't cherish it. She'll wonder why it cost her nothing. So let her wonder. Lean in. Let her feel your presence more than your words. Because when your silence holds weight, your voice becomes power. And when your mystery holds depth, your love becomes legendary. Final truth, the unshakable man. She didn't leave because you failed. She left because you forgot. It isn't taken. It's earned. Not by chasing, but by becoming. Not by needing her, but by standing firm whether she stays or goes. Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't about control. It was about command of the self. And the man who masters that doesn't lose. He chooses. So rebuild. Not for her. For you. Because the right woman won't love you for how much you give up, but for how much you stand in. And when you do, she won't just stay. She'll never want to leave. Why she left, a lesson in power and presence. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because she understood you, and in her world, certainty isn't safe, it's stagnation. She wasn't chasing perfection. She was drawn to mystery. And you, unfortunately, became predictable. The world doesn't reward loyalty as much as it respects restraint. The greatest restraint you'll ever master is over yourself. You were taught to be kind, to give endlessly, to love without condition. Told you goodness would win her over. But they were wrong. Machiavelli wouldn't mock you out of cruelty, he'd laugh because he knew what most men never learn: power isn't given. It's taken, by winning the war within. She didn't walk away because you lacked value. She withdrew because you were always there, too available, too transparent, too easy to grasp. You weren't an enigma anymore. You were a solved equation. And what's fully understood can be managed, not desired. That spark in her eyes, the one that once made you feel invincible, wasn't love. It was instinct, the magnetic pull of polarity. But you confused curiosity for connection, her tests for tenderness. Machiavelli wrote, "A ruler doesn't need to be good, only to survive." Survival doesn't come from seeking approval, it comes from inner stillness. From being anchored, not cold, but composed. In the silent dance between men and women, power doesn't belong to the loudest voice or the strongest hand. It belongs to the one who doesn't beg or justify, spoken. It's embodied. Women aren't drawn to chaos. They're drawn to steadiness, to the man who feels deeply but doesn't drown in it. Who speaks when silence holds meaning. Who reveals just enough, never everything. Most men rush to be seen. They overshare, over-compliment, over-confess. Every gesture whispers the same plea, "Please like me." And nothing erodes attraction faster than neediness. You thought you were being romantic. To her, it felt like surrender. She didn't leave out of malice. Her instincts whispered, "This man orbits me, not himself." That's not security, it's a warning. No one told you this: attraction thrives on tension, not access. It lives in what you guard, not what you give freely. Your presence should feel rare. Your attention, earned. What's offered without cost is rarely treasured. You don't have to be distant, but you must be deliberate. You don't need to disappear, but you must be intentional. Because when admiring your face, she's testing your foundation. Is he grounded? Is he led by impulse or anchored in purpose? If your world revolves around her, she'll step back, not out of cruelty, but because something primal recognizes, a man who bends too easily will break even faster. Machiavelli didn't write about love. He wrote about leadership. And leadership begins with self-mastery. If you don't govern your emotions, someone else will. The moment she realizes she can control you, she loses the desire to stay, not because she's broken, but because you handed her power. Part 1, when she tests you, be the wall, not the mirror. She won't announce the test. She doesn't need to, her silence will. Her absence. The shift in her tone, the pause in her replies. Most men misread it. They explain. Panic. Not from weakness, but because they've built their stability around her comfort instead of their own core. But you must be different. When she pulls back, she's not asking, do you care? She's asking, can you hold your frame? She's not trying to break you. She's trying to find you. She wants to know what happens when the warmth fades. Do you crumble, or do you stand firm? You thought she was losing interest. You thought you had to win her back. But it wasn't about attraction. It was calibration. Every woman, consciously or not, seeks something deeper than charm, leadership. Not dominance. Not performance. But the quiet, unshakable strength of a man who leads himself. He doesn't chase clarity. He doesn't fold under pressure. He doesn't abandon his values to avoid conflict. He breathes. He holds. He remains. She doesn't want another mirror. Men who reflect her moods, echo her words, adapt until they vanish. That's not strength. That's erosion. And she feels it, not as love, but as weight. Because when you become the mirror, you hand her the reins. And she doesn't want to lead. She wants to lean, but only on something that won't collapse. So when she's quiet, don't rush to fill the silence. When she steps back, don't chase. Hold your ground. Proof, you don't need her validation. You generate your own. Her distance isn't rejection. It's a scan. She's asking, will you lose yourself to keep me? And if the answer is yes, you become replaceable. Because a man who bends under pressure can't be trusted when storms come. Machiavelli would call this what it is, a loyalty test, not hers to you, but yours to yourself. Most fail, not from weakness, but because no one taught them that presence isn't declared. It's demonstrated. She doesn't need your poetry. She needs your poise. You don't prove yourself with words. You prove yourself by standing firm under tension. Because if she can shake you, she'll never fully trust you. And trust, not love, is what roots. When the room grows cold, don't flinch. Don't plead. Don't perform. Be still. Be calm. Be anchored. In your silence, she won't see indifference. She'll see power, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that holds space. Because in a world of noise, a man who remains unshaken is the only one who feels safe. Part 2, approval is a drug. You were addicted. You didn't chase her out of love. You chased her because you were starving, not for connection, but for validation. You needed her gaze to confirm your worth. That wasn't love. That was dependence. Machiavelli wouldn't condemn you. He'd warn any man who relies on another's approval has already surrendered his power. This didn't start with her. It started when they told you that being agreeable meant being good. That being liked meant being safe. That being chosen was the ultimate prize. So you adapted. You performed, hurt. Agreed when you didn't. Gave without boundaries. Silenced your truth just to keep her comfortable. You weren't loving. You were negotiating, trading authenticity for acceptance. Because approval is emotional heroin. 1 hit, you feel real. 2 hits, you forget your edges. 3 hits, you burn yourself out, desperate for her light. Not because she asked you to, but because you believed her attention made you whole. But here's the truth, approval is leverage. Once she senses you need it, she no longer needs to respect you. She can manage you. Not out of malice, but instinct. People manage what they don't admire. And when you offer your sense of self for approval, you stop being a presence and become a product. You've seen it before, the man waiting for the text. Editing his words to match hers. Saying, whatever you want, before she speaks. That man doesn't inspire desire. He drains it. Because she doesn't want a satellite orbiting her. She wants a sun, burning from its own core. Machiavelli didn't write about romance. He wrote about power. And true power comes from detachment, from needing no one's validation but your own. If your worth rises and falls with her glance, you are no longer a man, you are a mirror. And mirrors don't inspire love. They reflect it, until nothing remains behind. No woman can complete you. She can only amplify what you already are. Come to her full, and she magnifies. Come to her empty, and she vanishes, not out of cruelty, but because you gave her a role she was never meant to play. Stop chasing the high. Reclaim your throne. You weren't born to audition. You were born to rule, not loudly, but unshakably. Not to perform for love, but to embody it. Part 3, she wanted to feel you, not fix you. She didn't leave because you were broken. She left because she felt you trying to make her the cure. What you called vulnerability, she felt as weight. What you thought was intimacy, she experienced as obligation. You were confessing, unraveling, bleeding in her hands, hoping your openness would bind her to you. But she didn't want a patient. She wanted a partner. You mistook self-disclosure for connection. But connection isn't built on exposure, it's built on embodiment. On owning your shadows without needing her to hold them. You believed if you showed her everything, your pain, your fears, your unhealed wounds, she'd see the real you and stay. But she didn't want to be your therapist. She wanted to trust your leadership. She needed to feel your strength despite the storm, not drown in it with you. Because here's what no one tells you. Emotional expression without emotional control isn't intimacy, it's dumping. It doesn't deepen the bond. It drains it. It's not that she wanted you cold or closed. She just needed to know you had yourself, that your emotions were navigated, not outsourced. That you didn't require her to stabilize your chaos in order to stay centered. A man who shares from solid ground invites closeness. A man who shares from collapse creates pressure. And pressure kills desire. Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to suppress your emotions. He'd tell you to command them. Of power, the uncontrolled become the controlled. And in love, the emotionally dependent become emotionally dismissed, not because they're unlovable, but because they make love feel unsafe. The masculine isn't emotionless, it's the container for emotion. It's not about hiding. It's about, you wanted her to see your wounds and stay. But she wanted to feel your depth without falling into it. And when she realized you were handing her your wholeness, asking her to complete what you hadn't claimed yourself, her instinct whispered. This isn't mine to carry. Women don't fear emotion. They fear instability. They fear the man who can cry, but can't stop. Who can feel, but can't lead. But never rebuilds. You thought transparency was strength. But transparency without sovereignty is just glass, easily shattered. She didn't need you to be perfect. She needed you to be anchored. To prove that when your world shook, she wouldn't have to hold you up. Because a man who carries his own weight makes space for her to soften, but a man who collapses into her softness forces her to harden. You wondered why she grew colder, sharper, more distant. It wasn't her nature. It was your surrender. Not to her, but to your own unmet wounds. Part 4, Lead with energy, not explanation. You thought leadership meant words, promises, plans, reassurances. But she didn't listen to what you said. She listened to what you radiated. Masculine leadership isn't verbal. It's vibrational. It's not about telling her you're solid. It's about being solid, so consistently that she feels it before you speak. You explained too much. You chased her confusion with logic. You tried to fix her doubts with debate. It doesn't live in reason. It lives in energy. In tension. In the unspoken space between certainty and mystery. And here's the truth, the more you explain, the more you expose your fear. Not of her, but of losing her. She didn't need paragraphs. She needed